Good morning. Good morning on this very cold, brisk, frigid morning. Please feel free to keep your coats on, to hold a hot cup of coffee, whatever it takes, but maybe the weather will keep us all wide awake for this important program. On behalf of the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security, the Embassy of Japan, and the Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA, we welcome each and every one of you for this program, Resolution to Revolution, making and marking 25 years of the Women, Peace, and Security Framework. And I want to especially welcome those who traveled so far to be here. You will meet some of them in the discussions that are about to commence. And I want to thank all the representatives from the embassies who are here. There are many of you here, and I want to thank you not just for coming, but for the work that your governments do on this issue. It is invaluable and so critically important. And thank you to the ambassadors from Colombia, from the Chargé, from Slovenia, and from Iceland, who is about to join us. We meet in turbulent times. War seems to be the new normal. From Ukraine to Sudan, from Myanmar to the Middle East, and so many places in between. The international world order, as we have known it, is being severely tested. This discussion, focused on peace and security, could not be more timely. When the United Nations Security Council adopted Resolution 1325 in 2000, it recognized that women are critical to achieving sustainable peace, that they have an essential role to play in preventing conflict, in participating in peace negotiations, in recovery and reconstruction after conflict. There is voluminous research, indeed, an evidence-based case, including a lot of the work that our own institute has produced, that demonstrates the effectiveness of women's leadership in peace building and security. Women are not just victims of war, though they are disproportionately impacted, but they are also agents of change. Over these 25 years, the promise of the UN's framework is yet to be fully achieved. The benefits to the world would indeed be revolutionary if that were the case. Today, however, we do want to focus on the successes of implementation of the framework in negotiations, in foreign policy integration, in transitions from conflict to peace. Protection is also one of the pillars of the 1325 framework, and it recognizes that one of the most pervasive weapons of war is sexual violence. Survivors need to be supported and the perpetrators prosecuted. There has been little accountability. And we will look at actions to address those crimes as well. There are so many important lessons to be learned from around the world. And in our future events, we will also focus on greater steps the global community needs to take to more effectively implement this resolution. And we should bear in mind that not only was there the original resolution, but over the years, 9 more resolutions have been adopted by the Security Council to strengthen the original 1325. We have come together just days before the inauguration of President Trump. This issue has never been, nor should it be, a partisan issue. Both Senator Rubio, the nominee for Secretary of State, and the new foreign policy advisor, Mike Waltz, who in this very room talked about this issue, have been strong supporters of the Women, Peace, and Security Framework. The United States has the only law on women, peace, and security which was enacted during the last Trump administration and passed Congress on a very strong bipartisan margin. But let me say that this is only effective if it is fully integrated into our foreign policy, into defense policy, and all the other ways that it really matters. And that is true of our government and all governments on matters of peace and security. And with that introduction to our program, let me first welcome to the podium His Excellency Shigeo Yamada, Japan's distinguished ambassador to the United States. Ambassador Yamada.
Good morning, and Ambassador, thank you very much for your kind introduction. And everyone, thank you for joining us, braving this cold. And we are gathered here today to mark the 25th anniversary of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325. But before going into the details, let me thank our co-hosts for today, the Georgetown Institute of Women, Peace and Security, which has been a leader in promoting the WPS Agenda around the world, and Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA, which has been making significant contributions to strengthening Japan-US relations, including the WPS Agenda. So today, as we gather here in the warmth of the Copley Lounge, being here in this civilized atmosphere might lead us to believe that there's order and stability in the world. But as we all know, in certain parts of the world, that is not the case. Right now, terrible, unspeakable things are happening. And women are often the victims of that violence and chaos and hardship. This is why Resolution 1325 was adopted. And that is what has brought us together this morning in this room. Going into this year, I received many questions about what will change in the relationship between Japan and the United States, especially as the United States will soon have a new administration. I always say that the Japan-US relationship has moved beyond just bilateral relationship or regional cooperation partners, but become a truly global partners. We are now indispensable partners at the time of global instability, and that will not change. And we are also global partners for the WPS agenda, and we will continue to be a very strong partner in this field. The United States has led the Focal Point Network for the past 2 years. During that time, we have seen the establishment of 3 WPS centers of excellence around the world. And this year, Japan and Norway are taking over as co-chairs of the network. And next month, we will hold a capital-level meeting of this network in Tokyo. Japan will continue to build on the efforts of the United States and other partners. While the WPS agenda was originally focused on participation of women in peacemaking, conflict prevention, and peace-building efforts, the issues and priorities vary by country and region. For example, while Japan has fortunately not experienced conflicts recently, we have experienced various natural disasters. And in natural disasters, women and girls face unique risks. So Japan is, in our approach to the WPS agenda, highlighting the importance of women's participation in disaster prevention and recovery in order to ensure a holistic response to natural disasters and to achieve a stable recovery. Under the leadership of former Foreign Minister Kamikawa, who is honoring us with her presence today and who will speak later, Japan has positioned WPS Agenda as one of the main pillars of its foreign policy. And in order to operationalize that priority, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has established a cross-sectional system called the WPS Task Force to break down bureaucratic barriers within the ministry and to expand cooperation and coordination with other agencies in the Japanese government. For further promotion and development of the WPS agenda and turning it into concrete actions, we must bring together and pool our knowledge and expertise. This, in turn, requires us to strengthen the network of governments and civil societies around the world. And today's event is a part of that effort. Thanks to Ambassador Verveer and WPS Institute here at Georgetown, we have been able to bring together government and civil society leaders from around the world. So I hope today's discussion and exchanges will provide us with an opportunity to build new networks, deepen understanding of each other's initiatives in WPS agenda, and also enhance cooperation among the key players in the field of WPS in this very important anniversary year of 2025. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Yamada, and thank you for your leadership and your commitment on this issue. It's been a pleasure to work with you and the embassy on this. We're going to turn now to our opening conversation. That will be moderated by the Dean of our School of Foreign Service, Joel Hellman. He is steeped in international relations over many years of his career and very supportive of our work on women, peace, and security. He will be joined by Her Excellency, the former Foreign Minister of Japan. She's a member of Japan's House of Representatives, and she is the chair of the WPS Parliamentary Network in Japan, Her Excellency Yoko Kamikawa. And she will be joined by the Honorable Geeta Rao Gupta, the United States Ambassador at Large for Global Women's Issues, a position that she will be vacating in the next couple of days, but I want to ensure that we are so grateful. We want to thank her for her extraordinary leadership over this time in this position, and that she would be with us today to talk about these issues as the United States has been seeing them and operating in this area. So could you all please take the stage?
Good morning on this chilly morning, and thank you for being here. Let me start first by thanking Ambassador Verveer for bringing us all together, but more importantly for her pioneering leadership on this agenda over the last 25 years, and of course the pioneering role that the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security has played in understanding, deepening, and engaging on this agenda. And I'm very, very pleased to have this conversation today and to moderate some pre-selected questions that we have from our audience. So let's get right to it. I'm going to start with a question to Minister Kamikawa. You are known, of course, as a champion of women, peace, and security. If you will, could you please tell us how significant in your eyes this agenda is, and perhaps also your journey in mainstreaming the women, peace, and security agenda in Japan?
Thank you. you see?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dean Herman. I am very honored to be invited to this symposium today. This year marks the 25th anniversary of Security Council Resolution 1325. I would like to pay tribute to the women who have been leading the efforts in conflict resolution and peace building since the adoption of the resolution in the year 2000. At the same time, we must not forget that the progress made so far is also based on the efforts of many other women who have advocated for WPS values regardless of recognition. Japan adopted its National Action Plan on WPS in 2015 and is currently implementing its third action plan. As Japan is prone to natural disasters, our action plan has a unique approach in applying WPS in disaster risk reduction. Indeed, armed conflicts and natural disasters, especially situations of displaced people, have many issues in common. Therefore, Japan's action plan highlights women's leadership in not only various decision-making committees, but also in a prevention and risk reduction of the natural and man-made disasters. Despite the adoption of the action plan, the concept of WPS had not received much attention in Japan, especially among those who work on the local level and even in the national level, including parliamentarians. In 2022, I participated in the Women, Peace and Leadership Symposium in New York, which was a great opportunity for me to confirm the importance of women's roles for conflict prevention and peace building. In order to mainstream WPS in Japan and to advance this important agenda in a focused and swift manner, I decided to establish the WPS Parliamentaries Network Japan, collaborating with Ambassador Verveer, who is the organizer of today's panel discussion. Together with fellow members in the Diet, I organized a WPS dialogue with countries that are advanced in WPS implementation. I also promoted the relevance of WPS to military personnel in an event hosted by the United States Indo-Pacific Command at Camp Zama. Based on the knowledge gained through the WPS dialogue, we have compiled 5 rounds of recommendations and submitted them to the ministers of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Defense, and other ministries and agencies to encourage their proactive alignment with the WPS agenda. The proposal strongly urged the government to move forward and led to one of the major achievements, the inclusion of WPS in the basic policy on economic and fiscal management and reforms, which provided the financial basis to the government's efforts on WPS. This outcome shows that the strategic effort of us parliamentarians have influence on the policy at the high level. It now led to the appointment of WPS officer within each institution to strengthen and government organizational framework. This is the overview of what I would call the first stage of my journey for promotion of WPS. The second stage of my WPS journey started a couple of months after successfully changing the basic policy. In September 2023, I myself became the first female Minister of Foreign Affairs in 19 years to take office. In my role to implement the proposal that we sent to the government's officers, I positioned the WPS agenda as one of the main pillars of Japan's foreign policy. I immediately established a cross-organizational task force on WPS within the ministry and expanded our cooperation with related ministries and agencies such as the Ministry of Defense and the Fire and the Disaster Management Agency. Also, I made references to WPS in over 150 bilateral and multilateral occasions, calling for international cooperation. At one point, as I became known as a passionate promoter of WPS, my counterparts started to talk about WPS even before I mentioned it. As for international collaboration, in February last year, I held the WPS session on the Japan-Ukraine Conference for promotion of economic growth and reconstruction. The session demonstrates the multi-stakeholder approach by receiving the participation of civil society and the business community. The session also clearly announced that the WPS perspective would be incorporated in Japan's support to Ukraine. Efforts by line ministers and agencies also continued to evolve. The Ministry of Defense even went ahead, and it adopted its first WPS promotion plan in April last year and appointed a civilian and military gender advisors. Ministry of Defense has now actively led WPS in the Indo-Pacific region by hosting the first Japan-ASEAN WPS cooperation project in October last year by inviting ASEAN WPS defense officials as well as Pacific Island countries as observers, which resulted in creation of synergies in the region. It has also closely worked with the US and like-minded countries by establishing WPS Defense Focal Point Network. WPS is also reflected in Self-Defense Force of Japan activities, including in exercises and actual operations such as disaster relief. The WPS initiative is also making progress in JICA. This is an initiative that is in line with what I have been promoting as WPS Plus innovation during my time as foreign minister. JICA conducted vocational training for 600 women in Darfur and provided support for female managers in Cambodian's landmine management. In October 2024, the African Regional Seminar for the promotion of WPS was held in Kenya, which more than 119 participants from 11 African countries, AU, IGAD, and other organizations, reaffirming their solidarity. Moreover, in December 2024, last month, the business contest for the elimination of gender-based violence was held in Kenya. Startup entrepreneurs proposed business ideas utilizing digital technology. I have come to realize that in order to mainstream WPS initiatives, it is important to support WPS efforts and maintain its community, and to further raise this agenda to a higher level. I believe that it is my responsibility to promote concrete actions by further expanding the WPS Parliamentarians Network, sponsoring government initiatives, and deepening cooperation through multi-stakeholder partnerships. This is the overview of what I would call the first and the second stage of my journey for promotion of WPS. I'm very much happy to speak about the third stage in my later interventions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your extraordinary record of leadership, what it shows, what passionate leadership can achieve. We really appreciate the detailed engagement on that. Let me ask a question now to Ambassador Gupta. The U.S. was the first country to adopt a comprehensive law on WPS. It was known as, it is the Women, Peace and Security Act of 2017. Can you tell us a little bit, what did it take to pass such a historic law, and how has it shaped the U.S. in its promotion of women's meaningful participation in conflict prevention and post-conflict relief and recovery efforts?
Thank you, Dean Hammond, for inviting me, Melanne, for including me in this discussion, and good morning to all of you. That act was a singular sort of action taken in 2017 by the U.S. As a first, and I think still the only law that exists in any country. It has been widely acknowledged as a model for how to advance the women, peace, and security agenda, and it actually helped do that within the U.S. It set us on sort of a critical path to make sure that women's protection, women's participation, meaningful participation, was truly integrated into defense, diplomacy, foreign assistance programming, development across the U.S. government. So I think that the act itself is not something that's very well known. I've often in public forums and in bilateral meetings with colleagues in the US have had to point out that this is a law, that this is something that we are expected to follow. The law was also incredibly useful in establishing the necessary resources and staffing and accountability, because it's what resulted in the establishment of a bipartisan caucus in Congress on the Hill. And so that caucus was able to hold the government accountable for implementing the basic principles of that act and making sure that various departments across government, so it's the Department of Defense, so the State Department, the Homeland Security Department and USAID all worked together to integrate WPS into everything that we did. So, I mean, the biggest contribution of the law was that it institutionalized women, peace, and security.
Well, another great example of how to operationalize this agenda and get it integrated into the institutional architecture and framework. Well, I'm going to return now to Minister Kamikawa. you left us hanging about the third stage of your WPS journey. So let me ask you to tell us more. There, of course, there has been a lot of progress under your leadership as foreign minister. In your view, though, tell us what more needs to be done.
Well, thank you very much. Now, allow me to share my third stage way forward. It's my obligation. Well, the concept of WPS as represented by Resolution 1325 was groundbreaking in redefining the role of women as an agent of change. It highlights the importance of the inclusive, just, and sustainable society in order to achieve true peace and human security. Furthermore, it's been pointed out that natural disasters frequently occurring around the world could potentially trigger new conflicts or worsen existing conflicts. So it is extremely important to advance the application of the WPS agenda into the fields of disaster response, prevention, and mitigation to further enhance women's participation and leadership. So Japan has been emphasizing the importance of WPS in the context of natural disasters I mentioned before. So its efforts have gained significant interest and support from the international community. So it is our responsibility to share the lessons learned with other countries. In doing so, the role of parliamentarians is instrumental, that you mentioned about it. As a chairperson of the Parliamentarians Network of Japan, I intend to expand the size and actions in the parliamentary caucus. At the same time, I'm very motivated to expand the initiative of Parliamentarians Network to other countries, together with the United States, that established the first ever WPS caucus ahead of us. And I'm looking forward to working with my counterparts to promote the role of legislators for the WPS and establishing more caucuses, in particular in Asia and the Indo-Pacific region and Africa and many other areas. The U.S. enacted, that you mentioned, the WPS Act in 2017. In Japan, we don't have any that sort of legal framework right now. So directly to the targeting to the WPS. So I would like to promote discussion within the Diet on enacting a WPS law, not only to emphasize the WPS perspective, but also to create a concrete foundation for the implementation of WPS, such as by including training on WPS for public officials and securing a budget for this effort in order to implement many concrete action programs. On the 4th and to 6th of February next month, Japan will host the WPS Focal Point Network Tokyo meeting as an occasion to welcome various stakeholders. I hope that it will also serve as an opportunity to advance such perspectives together. In today's world of uncertainty, that Verveer and the ambassador mentioned about it, that we should all show solidarity and spirit for co-creation, for innovation. I am determined to continue strongly promoting WPS in the international community in order to achieve sustainable peace and human security. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So, returning to you, Ambassador Gupta, the minister has laid out the plans for making further progress on this agenda. The agenda is turning 25 years old, and much has been achieved, as we've already heard. Sustained efforts we know are needed to protect women's rights and safeguard the progress has been made. From your perspective, I wonder, what advice do you have for other governments and for the future U.S. administrations to further make progress on UN SCR 1325?
So I think that this moment, this anniversary, is a critical time for us to really reflect on past progress, where we've fallen short, and how we should really move forward as a stronger global community. So I will say that it's been, we've come a long way. We have now, I understand, 110 countries that have national action plans. Our own, the US, also released in October 2023 its updated strategy and national action plan. And just in December, we released our implementation plan to translate all that policy rhetoric into concrete local ways in which to implement what we say we will do. Given all that, I will say that one of the points that I reiterated multiple times during my tenure is that we've still fallen short of the implementation of the WPS vision, of that resolution. In a time when the world is, as the minister just said, dealing with so many conflicts, more conflicts than we've ever experienced since World War II, it behooves us to think long and hard about what will it take to implement this right from the start. How do we make it not the exception but the rule that women's voices are brought into these discussions from the moment a conflict begins, or when a country is fragile and is likely to end up in conflict. That's the question that I've been sort of ruminating about over the last 20 months. And I can tell you that there are three areas of focus that I've arrived at. One is we need demonstration of the fact that it can be done, and that it can be done right. We have past historical examples. I was talking to my friend here sitting next to me about Northern Ireland before the Security Council resolution. We have Liberia. So we have past experiences. But I truly believe that if we can demonstrate it, it is motivating to see that it can be done and may create a sort of global momentum. So I can just give you one example from my time in the Department of State. When the Sudan crisis started just before I joined. It was one of the first things I was briefed about. And we were able to bring together to Switzerland 14 women leaders from Sudan to accompany the conversations that were occurring, led by Special Envoy for Sudan, Tom Perriello, on cessation of hostilities, on increased humanitarian access, etc. To have the women sit together and workshop solutions, recommendations, based on their experience and their expertise. Many of these women had served as mediators in the past, had enormous knowledge. They brought to the table local information about particular areas in Sudan where it might be possible to open a humanitarian corridor. Thanks to Special Envoy Perriello and his team, the women actually participated in the discussions with the mediators, with the US mediators, and the technical teams that were there, as well as the international stakeholders and observers, and were able to inform those discussions in a very concrete way by bringing their realities to those technical experts who often work in a vacuum, in a closed room. And so I think that that was really valuable to see that it can be done and it has an influence. One of the biggest contributions that the women made was to the 2024 Code of Conduct that actually was a key component in Secretary Blinken's determination of genocide by the RSF in Sudan just a few weeks ago. So the fact that the women contributed to that and insisted that sexual slavery, that sexual violence, that starvation as a weapon of war should be included in that code of conduct, I feel really made a big difference. So we need more of that, and I can tell you, having experienced that, it wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the partnership between Tom Perriello and our office, his team and our office, as well as the Sudan desk and the Africa Bureau. So partnerships is, I think, our second focus area. It's like the partnership between the US and Japan. We need more such partnerships in order to learn from each other, to share. It's a fairly new field in a way, because we haven't succeeded in implementing much. So how can we learn where we have succeeded, and what are the lessons that we can then draw from? And in order for that to happen in a sustained way, we have felt very strongly in the office that we need platforms that can bring partners together. And so one of the things that that was mentioned is, we set up these centers of excellence, what we call the regional centers of excellence. The first one in Colombia, the second in Kosovo, through memorandums of understanding with those governments, with the host governments, and then the most recently in the Philippines, all over the last year, just so that there was a platform, a forum through which countries within a region could exchange lessons learned and insights and experiences, as well as interact, led by governments, but interact with academia, with local leaders, in order to know what could work best. So I think that's the second area that we really need to expand the depth and breadth of our partnerships. And then the third piece, I will say, is the one that you just talked about, which is legislators. And how do we involve them? In the very first event that I attended once I was confirmed, which was our US-hosted capital-level Focal Points Network meeting, we had invited, thanks to my colleague Kat Fotovat, she had come up with this idea, why don't we invite parliamentarians as well this time, not just the focal points? And so there were a few parliamentarians who attended, and listening to them, because they were for the first time learning about the issue, and felt that they should be sort of promoting this within their legislatures. And so I began to see how important it was, because after all, it is the legislators in every government who control the purse strings. They're the ones that can put resources towards these national action plans that otherwise might sit on a shelf. And so I think engaging parliamentarians, having what Japan has, which is the caucus, the network in the Diet, having what we have, a bipartisan caucus on the Hill, that's the kind of sort of body that we need in every country that has a national action plan. And I've started dreaming, and we talked about this a little bit when I was in Japan, is, of a global parliamentary caucus. If we can get parliamentarians across the countries that have national action plans to begin to talk to each other, to bring them together, I really do believe that the promise of 1325 might actually be realized.
Well, thank you for those inspiring examples. We have an opportunity, I think we have a few minutes to take question from students. I have questions that were already sort of submitted, and I have one to Minister Kamikawa. It comes from Emma Aguchi, a sophomore in SS. Is Emma here? Yeah, we always like to put a face to a name. Hi, Emma. Nice to see you here. Emma's question is, as Japan prepares to host the capital-level meeting in Tokyo, what specific domestic challenges do you aim to address to ensure that Japan's WPS initiatives align with its global leadership aspiration?
Wow. Thank you for a very nice question for me. Thank you very much. So next month is that event will occur. So I would like to tell you about some message to you. And this time, Japan serves as a co-chair of the WPS Focal Point Network this year. And the capital level meeting will be held next month in Tokyo. So this is an opportunity to identify the areas of priority. Priority setting is very important. We have to do many things, but we have to decide which is the most important or not. We have to discuss a lot in order to get the very important agenda priority. So I think in order to gather, and also the focal point networks which are very responsible for each country's action plan. So gather and then discuss about what kind of activities do they do, but difficulties they face, or how to manage that kind of things in order to develop the concrete action to pursue the outcome of the project. So we have to gather that kind of information together and then try to discuss about the priority. So I mentioned about the Ukraine in my my capacity in my foreign minister's position, and I asked the WPS issue in order to make the resolution, I mean the outcome of the both countries. What kind of agenda do we have to do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. That kind of event. I mean, the next month we will gather the information and then a kind of analyze or to set common priority like that. So that's I would like to pursue that kind of event.
Thank you. I have a question to Ambassador Gupta from Aliyah Ibrahim. Is Aliyah here? There's Aliyah Ibrahim. Aliyah asks, considering the global state of affairs, what do you envision the next 25 years of UNSCR 1325 to evolve into or mean for the world?
Aliyah, thank you for that question. I wish I could read the crystal ball somewhere and give you the answer. I'll tell you what my dream is. My dream is that it will be second nature for people who are in power, who typically are men, within governments, to immediately put in place, as soon as they know that there is tension in a country or a conflict has broken out, bring together the women of that country to advise and inform the foreign policy decisions, the defense decisions that have to be taken to respond to a conflict. That moment when it begins is when it should happen. And that's when it doesn't happen. We find ourselves then trying to advocate for it to happen after the fact. When peace is talked about initially, when conflict resolution, mediation begins, that's when women should be brought to the table. So I'm really hopeful that 25 years from now, we'll be talking about the success of that we did it, and that resulted in what the evidence has shown us all along, which is that it increases the stability of countries and assures that peace accords actually last.
Although we do have questions from others, we have, I know, a rich discussion planned right away after this. So I'm going to have to call this session to a close. And let me thank Minister Kamikawa, let me thank Ambassador Gupta for your remarks, for the concrete examples and experience that you brought from your leadership in the United States and in Japan, and your call for partnership and deepening engagement to make sure the next 25 years succeeds even more and much more than the first 25 years, but sets us on the right course. Thank you very much
Thank you very
for
much.
your leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you to that panel and for the leadership and the work that it represented. Her Excellency, the President of Kosovo, Vjosa Osmani, could not be with us, but she sent us these remarks on the progress her country has been making on the WPS agenda, including reparations for the crimes of sexual violence during the Kosovo War. We welcome her Chief of Staff and Foreign Policy Advisor who are with us today, and we salute President Osmani for her leadership on the Women, Peace, and Security Agenda, which has been a priority for her presidency. Can we run the video?
Esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to address you today on behalf of the Republic of Kosovo to take stock of the incredible work being done under the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. Thank you, Ambassador Verveer, the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security, the Embassy of Japan, and the Sasakawa Peace Foundation for your leadership and for partnering with us in championing this vital cause. Kosovo's story is one of resilience and determination, a reminder that progress is always within reach when a nation chooses to prioritize justice and equality. At the Summit for Democracy 4 years ago, we made a bold promise to place the WPS agenda at the heart of our policies. Today, I'm proud to stand before you and say we've lived up to that promise. And I strongly believe that if Kosovo can do it, so can others. More than 2 decades ago, Kosovo endured one of the darkest chapters in its history. Sexual violence was used as a weapon of war by the Milosevic regime, leaving over 20,000 survivors, primarily women, grappling with profound pain and injustice. For years, their voices were silenced, their suffering hidden behind the veil of stigma. But they refused to stay silent. They chose courage over fear, justice over despair. And because of their resilience, a whole nation found its voice. In 2018, we became one of the first countries in the world to institutionalize reparations for survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. These reparations are more than financial assistance. They are a national acknowledgement, a commitment to recognizing their pain and honoring their strength. It's a moral promise to say, we see you, we stand with you, and we will never forget, and we will never stop seeking justice. In Kosovo, April 14th now stands as a symbol of this commitment. I had the honor of proclaiming this day as the Day of Survivors of Sexual Violence during the last war. In honoring individuals like Vasfia Krasniqi, who endured unimaginable horrors as a teenager, but emerged as a global advocate for justice. And today, Vasfia serves as my special envoy for survivors of sexual violence, as well as others who are supporting us in this path, ensuring that the voices of thousands are not only heard, but lead our efforts for change. But Kosovo's commitment doesn't end at our borders. Through the establishment of the Regional Center of Excellence on Women, Peace and Security, we are sharing our lessons, building partnerships, and working to end the use of sexual violence in conflict globally. Because this fight isn't just Kosovo's fight, it's a shared one. So, ladies and gentlemen, the WPS agenda is about more than just addressing past injustices. It's about building a future where women are not sidelined, but lead at the peace table, in government, and in the decisions that shape our world. Because as we know, no peace can last if half of the population is excluded. Kosovo's story is a reminder of what's possible when survivors become the architects of peace, when their courage informs policy, and when the world stands united in saying, violence against women will never be tolerated. Because until every woman is free from violence, none of us are truly free. Thank you.
And Liarta, tell Madam President that we are very grateful that she could be with us, at least virtually, and we really continue to work with her and applaud her for her hard work on this issue. We're going to turn now to our panel of experts, negotiators, and mediators from different parts of the world. If you could please come up on the stage, all of you, please. So I'm going to begin with Dr. Avala Kilmary. She has worked in the voluntary sector promoting peace in Northern Ireland for the last 5 decades. A founding member of the Women's Coalition, that was a group of women from both sides of the division there who came together first to see what they could to chart a course for peace, and then wound up at the negotiating table. She was one of those negotiators, which resulted in the Good Friday Agreement that ended the Troubles. And the Troubles were a violent conflict in Northern Ireland that lasted some 3 decades. So, Avala, it's always wonderful to see you and to have Northern Ireland and its story, because it has been a success story, represented here in this discussion. So as a founding member of the Women's Coalition, you played an instrumental role in negotiating the Good Friday Agreement. It has stood the test of time. There have been ups and downs. There have been hiccups, but it has stood the test of time for 30-some years now. So tell us, how did that process become inclusive, and what difference did it make?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation to join this important gathering. I think, first of all, I always make the point that when we talk about peace building, that it's not just whenever the weapons are laid down. It happens as effectively right through the conflict as well. And as you say, we had 3 decades of open violence. And what we found was that, you know, when you have that all the official energy and effort goes on how do you end the violence? You know, how do you actually get some sort of a peace agreement around a constitutional settlement? And so many issues that actually affect women and girls are silenced, are ignored. In fact, I always remember an old Republican once saying to me, Avala, you know, and we were actually arguing about domestic violence because we did, our legislation in Northern Ireland was Victorian. And he said, look, that's all very well, but let's build the house first, i.e. have United Ireland, before we furnish it. And I said, Paddy, yeah, but I know when you come round to furnishing it where I'll be in the kitchen. But that was the attitude. You know, you build a house, you deal with our important issues, and the issues that are important, such as physical safety to women and girls, are ignored. So we actually formed the Women's Commission, or the Women's Coalition, out of annoyance. Basically because we felt so many issues that we'd raised consistently for decades were being ignored. And to cover our backs, we actually did a survey of the main traditional political parties. We gave them a list of issues, and we didn't get any response. So whenever the electoral system to our peace talks was set up, it was set up in such a way to actually bring in small parties because the Irish and the British government needed the political voice of paramilitaries at the table. And there were some small paramilitaries. And we looked at the electoral system and we said, well, actually, you know, we have a sort of a large number of active women across Northern Ireland, and as much to annoy the main parties, we will actually set ourselves up as a coalition, not a party, and contest the election. And one of the reasons we did it was on representation. Because when we went to the parties, they said, oh, well, you know, we would love to stand women, but, you know, they won't stand, you know. We can't get them to put their names forward. And in 6 weeks, we got 90 women to stand. We actually went and we put an ad in the local paper. And we said, if you're a woman interested in politics, interested in making a difference, are prepared to work on the 3 values that we came up, not big policies, values of inclusion, human rights and equality, give us your name. And we actually had about 150 names coming forward, and we had 90 going up. So that was the first thing we did. We broke the myth that women were not prepared to stand for politics. In terms then of the actual negotiation, what we found was a number of things. First of all, the importance of doing our homework. The importance of actually doing the research to say, not just, you know, the problems or difficulties that women were facing, but how women had kept the place going in any level of normality during 3 decades of violence. So women as agents of change, that women had actually done that but not been recognised. Secondly, we made the point of actually building the relationships to actually find out, to be clear, what were the red lines of the other parties that were negotiating? What were the red lines of the British and Irish government? So what we did was we tried to be as inclusive and active as possible with our membership. We broke up into teams and we actually sort of said to women, now, your job is to shadow Sinn Féin. Your job is to shadow Unionist Party, whatever. We gathered the information, and because we had deliberately set ourselves up as a cross-community party, we actually knew what some of those issues were going to be before we went into the multilateral negotiations. And the other thing that we did was, very often in peace talks, it's the big names that get all the attentions. Well, actually, it's the political advisors and the people that are slightly in the next round of support. They're really important. So for argument's sake, our talks were chaired by Senator George Mitchell. We got a lot of help from his aide-de-camp, Martha Pope, who was able to tell us, well, actually, this is a nuance here that you might be able to exploit, whatever else. So that sort of was really important. And the other thing that we found, and I was saying to Anna earlier on, she always said it, always look at who is holding the pen. Whenever all the rhetoric is being talked about, who is writing something that it shall happen rather than it may happen? I mean, on one occasion, we actually got so fed up that we kidnapped one of the draftsmen, and he was a man. And we said to him, you are not going home tonight until you tell us why whatever was the number 30 policy papers we put forward were not being represented in the drafts. And he said, oh, well, he says, but the chapeau, the first paragraph, Norman French, the chapeau of the agreement is all about Catholics, Protestants, nationalists, unionists, who wants to be part of United Ireland, who wants to remain part of Britain. And I mean, women don't feature in that. And I said, do you mind? Women have been living in an armed patriarchy for the last 3 decades, and you're saying we don't feature. In the end, actually, he got so fed up that he did actually put in a number of lines about supporting the representation of women. But again, it was a lesson to me of where does the power lie? Who has the influence? And sometimes it's not always in the big names. It's on that sort of, the ecosystem underneath that, and that's what you actually had to influence. And I suppose the last thing was, being prepared to actually do things differently. Our first election poster, which caused great annoyance to some of our male politicians, was a cartoon dinosaur saying, say goodbye to dinosaurs, in the women's suffrage colours of green, white and violet. Give women the vote. And some of the male politicians said, well, we're very annoyed. You're calling us dinosaurs. I say, well, is your name there? However, if you want to self-identify, I mean, And I suppose, but it is actually one of the things that I always say. A certain degree of humour and the ability to actually pull out some of the more ridiculousness of the self-pompous sort of approaches is very useful, actually, in actually your communication. So I suppose that the last thing I would say, and actually it was a mistake, that we made. We were so busy in trying to actually get the peace agreement, we didn't spend enough time looking at the implementation. And that actually came back to haunt us. And it was the point that Special Ambassador made there, implementation, monitoring, because you can get, in the heat of the moment, people to sign up to the rhetoric and the sort of the intention, but actually when it comes down to it. And I mean, in Northern Ireland, we're still negotiating bits of the implementation of the Good Friday Agreement, and that's after 25 years. And as you move away from that period of heightened interest in the agreement, it becomes harder and harder to actually get the same level of support behind implementation.
Well, thank you so much, Evelyn. The women from Northern Ireland always energize any conversation on women, peace, and security. They were not meant to be at the peace table, and you heard how they got themselves there. And the impact they had on that Good Friday Agreement, issues like human rights, reconciliation, integrated education, none of that would have ever been in the peace agreement, and the work continues. And they continue by working with women all over the globe on this agenda. And in fact, for years, I used to take women from Israel and Palestine to Northern Ireland to learn from the women there. And they couldn't believe how they had come together across divisions. So thank you for kicking off this panel. Binta, we're now going to come to you. As long as I have known you, which is many, many years, you have been in the trenches struggling for women's rights. She is the special envoy of the chairperson of the African Union Commission on Women, Peace, and Security. She's also the founder of an NGO, the president of Femme Africa Solidarité, FAS, known to everybody who has worked with them. And she has been so involved in reconciliation processes in a number of African countries. So, Binta, in all of this work that you have done over so many years, what difference have you found that this framework that we've been discussing in this program today, what difference has it made? But most importantly, can you give us some examples, some concrete examples of how it's been implemented and it has resulted in positive outcomes? And welcome. I know you're freezing. She's from Senegal. She is absolutely freezing. As many of us are, even though we're not from Senegal.
Travel from Dakar, where it was very sunny and enjoying our oceans, and now being here. But really, I appreciate being with you, Melanne, for many, many years, and your leadership in women, peace, and security is because of you that the United States have embraced the law on women, peace, and security. I was with you and many in this room in the Security Council with Hillary Clinton and Mary Robinson when we were evaluating 1325, where Hillary promised that they will bring 1325 in the state. It's because of you. I know you were behind everything, so we need to congratulate you, and that's why when you call,
let's talk about Africa a little bit.
And for Japan, for putting that in the international relationship, and it's about leadership. At the end of the day, leadership and one woman can make a big difference. And that's why also we're having great relationship with the US, but also with Japan. I like the title that you say, From Resolution to Revolution. And I think we need a revolution after 25 years. Without guns, of course, but we need a revolution with, whatever you have said here, the tools that we need to have, not just 1325, but we need that revolutions to make it active, achievable, and so on and so forth. Now your question in two. The first is before 1325. What motivated 1325? I was involved in the Liberia and Manu River process where the women like the Northern Ireland took the decision to do the shuttle diplomacy and were able to bring peace in their country. And I think they were the first one that were mentioned by Kofi Annan in a report before even the Security Council talked about women, peace, and security. It was before. But before that contribution, it was the Beijing process also in Dakar, where UNIFEM at that time, now UN Women, put a peace tent from Africa, the Women Peace Tent, motivate also 1325. We need to write on this story. Because from there they went to Beijing, where Hillary again said women's rights are part of people's rights, the human rights. And there the peace tent become part and parcel of the Women, Peace and Security agenda with UN Women and many who were in Beijing. So that motivate, and of course the Namibia and so on, motivate the drafting on resolution that we know 1325 and nine more that have come after that. That's the history. And it comes from conflict zone where women were suffering, but women contribute after to say, we are not just going to be victims, but we are going to contribute in a meaningful way, not survivors only, but leading even peace negotiation. So now the second issue that you say, now that you have 1325, then what? I think it can be used. I have witnessed in Burundi where women have come in the room. No, you go out because you are not part of it, because you don't hold the guns. And they said, my gun is 1325. Because this is a resolution that have been mandated by Security Council and we want to use it. The same thing in the DRC process in the Sun City, where also women come with 1325 to say this is the tool we need to use, and the mediator to accept them as observer sometime is not enough, but in the other time accept them to be at the table and to contribute like the Northern Ireland. So they are good example, but maybe on the second, when we evaluating, we will see why, what need to be done. Because right now in Africa, being the special envoy, we have made, with all the challenge we have on Sudan, South Sudan, you name them, on other issues, terrorists in the Sahel, but we have made tremendous effort in our continent. It's a continent that have more than 30, the more than majority of the National Action Plan, which need to be brought to the Parliament for implementation. We have a tracking process, which we call the Continental Result Framework, where we got 20 countries that have reported so far on Resolution 1325. But we need to do more, because women are still suffering in many countries, not just the Sahel, but also where we have terrorists, but also in many other countries like Sudan, and emerging threats that are also we are facing when it comes to flood, the issues of post-conflict situation, humanitarian. I was recently in East Congo, but the refugee issues, the crisis, the humanitarian crisis in the DRC in East Congo is something that need all our to address. So still there are gaps on implementing our Women, Peace and Security agenda. But I wanted to salute all of you in this room, because these are the doers and the makers of 1325. And when we are together with our policy making, our research institute, but also having more young women that are studying women, peace and security, we have the movement, the real movement, including the men, because in Africa now we have what we call positive masculinity. We need more men into this agenda, and I'm sure that we are really getting there, but in the, I will talk about what needs to be done in the future. But thank you again.
But Binta, you also have the situation rooms, which is really, I think, a great example of prevention.
From Seneca, yes. No, that's a very good cases, that what we call the women's situation room, and the model on the situation room when we saw Hillary in the situation room of this. So for us, it was for elections. And the issue of the partisans, in Africa, election is very violent. Before it was not the same thing in America. Now I think it become also something that we need to watch. But we create the Women's Situation Room between all political parties, women, civil society, to lead the discussion into election and to really, make sure that they become peaceable, they become peaceful, they become transparent. What we look at in the Senegal was a good model. The women have created that with the tree. They mobilize, they go to meet religious leaders, traditional leaders, they go into village, they sensitize. It was the road to peace, and they go everywhere. That model is 3M. They mobilize and they did mediation. They go from one side to another, and whenever there is on television, they will beat around to say, we need peace. And monitor the electoral process as well. They get involved, they send monitoring, they send observers mission, they involve the media. It's the whole ecosystem they use to make sure that they monitor the election. But at the end of the day, they were able to bring peace in, like, my country was just at the stage of, having the same thing like electoral violence. But the women played that key role by putting in place the Utujam, the Women's Situation Room, which really now ended by bringing peace. And now it became a model. Every election in Senegal, the women's situation is established, and they continue to monitor even after the electoral process. So that have been replicated in other countries, in Kenya, in Liberia, in many places now. Women are getting together as a model of mediation, the electoral process, because we know how in Africa, elections is a fight to get power, and sometimes the men, the muscles, come into the ring. And what women can bring is their tools, but it's really about tools. It's doing the research, is being deployed and making sure that they monitor, but they influence as well, and shouting outside when necessary. They put their white, millions of women white outside to say, you will not destroy our country because you want power. Take the power in a peaceful way, but not in this way.
Now, the situation rooms are a great example of prevention, which is that first pillar of Women, Peace, and Security's framework. Anna Bosman was the former legal chief in the Bonsignore peace process in the Philippines with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, the MILF. And she's also worked in so many capacities in this peace process. She's a former member of parliament and the attorney general in the Bangsamoro transition government. So welcome all the way from the Philippines. And this has always been one of those classic women, peace, and security success stories, was the process set up in this work with the Mindanao rebels. The peace agreement between the government of the Philippines and the MILF was groundbreaking as the first peace deal with a non-state armed group. And we were going to hear from Anna what made it successful. Also, the chief representative of the government and the chief negotiator were female. So we want to tell us how this worked. How did you ensure inclusion? Because that's one of the classic outcomes of this case. And how has it worked since?
Thank you. First, thank you, Ambassador Melanne, for the invitation to the Sasakawa Foundation, to the Japanese government, and the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security. It's a great honor to share the experience of the Philippines, particularly the Bangsamoro, on this particular topic, because I think we are quite lucky in the Philippines. Already, the country, the Philippines, fares better in terms of women's agenda advocacy as compared to our neighbors in Southeast Asia. So it really set the stage for this more nuanced involvement of women when it comes to matters or issues that are traditionally dominated by men, which is peace and security. Looking back at what it entailed for the negotiations between the government and the more Islamic Liberation Front, I can say that pretty much a confluence of factors contributed to its success in the signing of the peace agreement. The fact that it is still an enduring peace agreement that is undergoing implementation with, I suppose, with many parallels with Northern Ireland, so many hiccups along the way, but it's still there. Nobody has abandoned it. And one and foremost, and I agree with most of the jurisdictions represented here today, is leadership. It's really, number one is having women in positions of policy and decision-making that are not just, present, but are active advocates for the women's agenda in matters of security, but also are aware of the nuanced issues of women when it comes to peace processes. Add to that, and Avila mentioned this earlier, that what we always share, not just the key positions of leadership, but the other layers that are involved in peace negotiations. So my involvement and my other colleagues were part of the technical working groups. We were part of the secretariat who were actually behind the laptops that were flashed on the screens to finalize the language of the agreement. We were the ones walking, knocking on the doors of legislators to support the process as it was coming to the signing of the peace agreement, getting them on board, because ultimately we need more support from those that are not directly involved in the peace process to ensure that it doesn't encounter so much resistance when it comes to implementation. Those key factors birth more involvement for women. In the case of the Philippines, we had the secretary of the government agency dealing with peace processes, the Office of the Presidential Advisor on Peace Process, is a woman who is also minded or very purposive in bringing in more women into the process. And that really pretty much started that tradition of ensuring that every mechanism, every entity created, every document signed has clear explicit mention of women's involvement, explicit mention of the substantive issues of women, and the many other things that came after that. So that's perhaps number one. The second, I think, is in the case of the Bangsamoro, in the case of the Philippines, there are two parties talking, the Philippines and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, or MILF. And it's important that both are open and are willing to embark on that discussion that are not so much commonplace before it happened. One anecdote that comes to mind is the insertion of the term meaningful women's participation in one of the documents in the peace agreement. And we are aware that there's acceptance and willingness to discuss women's issues, see women in the mechanisms, but to formalize it and institutionalize it is something that doesn't really, I wouldn't say faces resistance, but opens up questions. It invites more questions from both sides of the aisle. And I'm speaking as one who have talked to our side also in the government during that time. When we talk about women's issues, the question really is, do we need to put it there? Isn't it something that will, like Northern Ireland, will it not just follow naturally? So those kinds of things are it will take time, take more discussion in the beginning, but eventually becomes commonplace, becomes something that either one of the sides will naturally and eventually push forward and initiate discussions on. And the third, I think, is as I mentioned, getting aware about the issues, the nuance of the issues of a minority community and the minorities within that community, within a larger, Philippine society. And to do that, the involvement and the active, participation, maybe the strategy of annoyance from civil society.
New strategy.
It really helps push the envelope. People in positions and institutional roles can only do so much, but there's a lot that needs to be done at the community or grassroots level. There's a lot of lobbying that is more effectively done by people that are, more in numbers and can take the time to go legislator by legislator, policymaker by policymaker, and articulate all of these issues at the level that the audience is able to grasp. So those things really did it for the Bangsamoro peace process.
Thank you so much, and those are very good points that you underscored. We're going to turn now to Maho Nakayama. She comes to us from Tokyo, where she is the director of the Peace Building Program for the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. She has supported and worked with peace and reconciliation projects in Indonesia, South Thailand, Philippines, other places. And I think it's interesting, Maho, that you have done a lot of vital work at the local level, coming to know the individuals involved and also the processes that are put in place. Can you give us we rarely hear about these conflicts, and we hear even less about how they're evolving and whether peace is successful in the end. So can you give us some examples of the work that you've been involved in that can elucidate some of these issues?
Thank you, and good morning to you, all of you, and thank you to the organizers, Ambassador Yamada and the Embassy of Japan, and President Akimoto and Shanti-san and the friends of the Sasakawa USA, and also Ambassador Verveer and the colleagues of G-WIPs. And also, if I may, I want to express our deepest gratitude and respect for that Her Excellency Yoko Kamikawa, for her outstanding leadership and guidance. And we have been we feel that we are very fortunate to be part of the WPS Parliamentarians Network Japan's activities. And thank you so much. With regards to the questions, yes, we started our peace building work 15 years ago, but with slightly different approach from other major international donors. We decided to have the long-term engagement with focus on the particular specific conflict areas, with respect for the ownership of the local stakeholders and understanding of the specific context. So we were proud that me and my friend Akiko initiated the conversations between the conflict parties. We decided to work in southern Thailand, in Pattani, and we initiated conversations between conflicting parties, the government of Thailand, and also armed group called Barisan Revolution Nasional, and which paved the way for the official peace talk to be started in 2013. But I don't think we can call it success because we are still working on this, and we have been constantly supporting the official peace talk by capacity building and also supporting back-channel communication. But at the same time, we have been facilitating a multi-track, multi-level dialogues on peace process. So we have established an umbrella organization of the armed group, and also we have supported the establishment of the civil society network in Pattani, in southern Thailand, and also women's civil society network. And we have been conducting workshops for the leadership training for women's activists, and also we have been teaching the importance of the women's perspective to men male activists, and other parliamentarians, local stakeholders. We are aiming at the incremental changes that which can happen in this conflict area. But my point here is that maybe this is resonating to what previous speakers has talked about, but of course we haven't yet given up to increase the number of the negotiators and mediators and signatories of the official peace talk. But we know that armed group loves masculine leadership, and they don't accept that women's negotiator sometimes, and the Thai side also the representation of the women is very limited. So what we are trying to do is to connect spaces and network so that discussions done at the grassroots level will be brought to the higher level of negotiation. So we have been, for example, in Thailand, the ad hoc special committee on the conflict in Pattani was set up 2 years ago within the parliament, and we have been sending the women civil society leaders to this parliamentarian discussion at the parliament, or we have brought the women's group to the facilitators in Malaysia, so that the women's problems and challenges on the ground will be brought to the facilitators. And this way we are trying to connect those different platforms, and so that the women's concerns and discussions done by women will be brought to the higher level of the negotiations. And so I hope that we can realize a peace accord within, we don't have to wait another 15 years, but we can realize it within coming years. And another example that I want to introduce, is that from Central Sulawesi in Indonesia, the city called Poso, where people experienced horizontal conflict between Christian and Muslim communities back in late 90s. And people still living with, geographical segregations, and still there is a distrust among communities. Therefore, this becomes a very strong backdrop against the rise of the violent extremism. So the Muslim community, they have the feeling of unfulfilled retaliations against Christian. So they support the violent extremist group and enter into those groups. And there has been terror attack, and also this Poso has been considered as the breeding ground by the Indonesian government. And what we have been doing is that we sit together with the local partners to design a tailor-made workshop and intervention for the former combatants and former prisoners, and also their wives. And because we think this is not the ideological radicalization, but more to do with the matter of the unfulfilled reconciliations, the past of the conflict. So we're trying to have the sessions on the reflection on the identities, or the psychosocial support for the former combatant and former prisoner to enter into new life, to start a normal life. So we have already trained 100 former combatants and former prisoners, and also wives, and all of them still keep distance from the violent extremist group. And women, especially, we have, in the second year, we have invited the families from the very notorious village called the Tamanjeka, which is at the foot of the mountain. So they were considered to be hiding all these terrorists. So they were alienated by the neighboring communities. But we invited those former combatants, and also wives, the separate workshop for the wives. But wife is very quick to communicate, start communications, overcoming all these years about alienations. And finally, and also in the following year, we have invited former combatants and former prisoners and their wives from the Christian community too. Those people have never communicated each other after 20 years. But the women from those Christian communities, they have started business with the Muslim community after the workshop. So it's really amazing that those women can bring the changes on the ground. I'm sorry I have been talking long, but about the local perspective, finally I want to touch upon. And since we are practitioners, we naturally pay attention to what kind of local resources that they have in their own, the context that we work in terms of traditions and norms and experiences of women activities. And for example, in Maluku, in Indonesia, they have the customary system, still that it works, and they have a customary law to protect women against violence. So we are now currently discussing with them how we can strengthen those customary laws. That is an example of the local traditions. But also I want to share with you that my experience of conversation with local stakeholders after our masculinity studies, that we had the opportunity to work with GWIP for the past 3 years on the theme of men and masculinity, and GWIP's team has published a very excellent report entitled Beyond Engaging Men. But after this, we went back to the GWIP's team, to the field, 3 contexts that we researched, and share the research finding with the local stakeholders, local policymakers and activists and also academics. And one of the issues which came up is that with regards to WPS agenda is about the division of the private and public domain. They say that usually in global north context, division between public domain and private domain is considered to be very clear. But in post-conflict context that we researched, that they say that the division between private and public is not that clear much. And there are so many spaces in between private and public. So there are like religious activities, community activities, and also ceremonies where the woman can negotiate. And these spaces can be, usually, if we talk about enhanced women leadership, we only think about the enhanced role of women in public sphere, but we think, they told us that maybe we can pay more attention to what has been done by women in between private and public, so that those domain and negotiation that has been done by women can be strengthened to be, brought up to the higher level of the decision making. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Maho. And you see how important this kind of inter-community dialogue and discussion works at getting at the real heart of the problems. So I think it's doing what you all do in an interventionist way, in a sustainable way, brings out some of the dynamics that include norms, mindsets, all of these things that have to be addressed that are rarely addressed. We're running short on time, so I'm going to ask just a quick round. Given the intensive work you have all done, what advice do you have to the international community? Where should our focus be? So, Avila, for example, how do we get women to be in the peace table negotiations? What does it take besides annoyance?
Well, it takes a number of things, and it is at different levels, the international, the national, the community that was mentioned there. I mean, I still think that, at the international level, the role of champions is really important. And we've had a number here this morning. I also remember, Mary Robinson, whenever she was the UN Special Envoy, the Great Lakes. And when she saw there wasn't enough women there, she had, a small grant scheme. She brought together, a sort of convenings of women. it can make a huge difference if there is intentionality there. The other thing I think that's really important, I think in terms of the 3 R's, rights, representation and resources. The rights issue is really important, and I worry about it at the moment because it is being seen almost like as a Western imposition, and that is dangerous where, you know, rights are women's rights as well. So I think that really needs to be sort of safeguarded, but also in an inclusive basis to take it in from different, as you say, some traditional perspectives as well. Representation. You know, and again, technical things like what electoral system you have make a big difference. We tried to get a different electoral system in the Good Friday Agreement, and we didn't win it. And we looked at some of the Scandinavian systems and so forth. So that's important. But also representation of different sectors within the community, because women don't speak with one voice. You know, and I'm just looking at Myanmar at the moment, you know, the different both national and ethnic sectors, whatever. We need to get to that sort of meso level where we're sure of the inclusion of those different voices. And actually also sometimes a diaspora. If you think of Ukraine at the moment, the number of women that actually are living in other countries, and where's their voice in what's happening? And then resources. And I loved the example from Japan in terms of raising with the Ukraine reconstruction, the women, peace and security dimension. And we benefit from the European Union with the European Union Peace Programme in Northern Ireland. They did mention the equality dimension. But, you know, again, where are women in those decision-making at sort of regional level in terms of resourcing? And the last thing I think I would note is we talk about tracks 1, 2, 3 and 2.5 or whatever else. We never talk about the connective tissue between them. And that's really important. And I thought it was wonderful when I was reading the Sasakawa framework, you know, where they talked about, look, we need to take the narrative beyond peacekeeping and security. You know, to that, and again, it was the Madam Foreign Minister mentioned that. You know, that what does security mean for women in different situations? And I think it started in Latin America, this idea of everyday peace indicators. Well, what are the everyday peace indicators for women, and to actually factor that into negotiations?
Thank you. You know, one of the things that Avila mentioned is something we all struggle with, is women are doing the kind of work you described at the local level. They're facilitating dialogue, reconciliation, addressing humanitarian issues. Yet they are rarely connected, to use your word, to the bigger discussions that take place. What can the international community do better, because clearly we have to do better, at supporting women peace builders at the local level? And this might extend to both you, Anna, and Maho as well, and then we'll close this part of the discussion.
Yeah, thank you. As a special envoy, what we did at the AU was to create a forum to evaluate every year. Women, Peace and Security Forum, where we bring all stakeholders. And it's very important that, as you are doing with Japan and other institutes like the Sasakawa, to be together, you know, to make sure that we work not on silo, but we are together when it happened and we have a common agenda and common issue. I think the institute that Georgetown is doing is very important. You know, during our last December meeting, as you said, to go to the highest level, women are saying we need to reverse and create our own table, right? And they're starting. For example, we call on the mediator, the big mediator, which is Angola right now, on DRC and Rwanda. The women were the one to call for the meeting, even though it was in Angola, to make sure that the mediator is sitting and listening to them, and to make sure that they are at their table and they design the agenda to make sure that they participate on that. So in the ecosystem they create, we have more women leaders. As you say, we need women in government, in governance, more women to make sure that they are part and parcel. We need more women in the mediations who are trained in mediation as well, which is happening for we have Femwise, Africa, and others. But what we we have the law, of course, the 1325, but we need to have them more on the law. But what we need at the international level for the deployment is resources, Ambassador. When they are investing on those who hold the guns, always, we invest the international community to call for a meeting where those who are in the rebels group and others in a hotel. By the time we want the women are organized from track 2 to track 3. But to go to track 1, you need to be deployed very quickly, very fast, and we don't have the resources to do that. That's the reality. We need to think of the resource we deploy on the others to silence the gun. How do we make women will silence the gun if we support them? I think that is where we need to work right now to make sure that we have a fund for women, deployment fund for women. We deploy peacekeeping. Why don't we deploy women who are ready to bring peace? I think we need to have that reflect. The research, the Institute can take us on that and the missing link into the system. Thank you.
So Anna, out of your experience, what message do you have to the international community?
Well, in the case of the Bangsamoro, I think because the Bangsamoras already signed a peace agreement that effectively reflects what we want in terms of WPS for the Bangsamoro. But we are now in the stage of implementation. And the implementation is not just about peace building, but effectively, especially for areas of post-conflict, it's really nation building. And being ready, having women ready for that next stage. The technical requirements of being part of nation building is really what will sustain the participation and heavy involvement of women in crafting, designing that new reality that we want for ourselves, for the next generations. It may take training the young to be ready for those kinds of responsibilities. We will be having our first elections this year, and we are lucky that in the transition government, the members of the government were selected, and there were key advocates in the regional government, in the Bangsamoro government, that pushed for WPS. But in the elections, as is the reality in the Philippines, especially in the Bangsamoro, those who might win might not necessarily have that same lens as those that have been involved in the peace process when it comes to women's issues. So that also requires some strengthening, and maybe that's where the international partners can help. But maybe as a personal note, some of the things that are the unpronounced effects of post-conflict is really having negotiation between the state and rebel groups is the prominent role given to men, oftentimes of the older generation. And that, I'm not saying for all, but in many instances, even if we have women, and we know it will not be that many, who are in positions of contribution for that nation building I was talking about, there might be some interactions where women are made to feel more uncomfortable compared to their male counterparts. And I think it's important for us to realize that it's not enough that we have the technical know-how. It's enough that we have the support that we do in terms of resources, in terms of institutions, in terms of cementing the role in perpetuity in laws or policies of women, but also to have that safe space for women to engage. Because if that is not present, the engagement could be either stunted or less heard. So I think that's where learning from the experience of the Bangsamoro, having shifted from my role in the Philippine government to recently being part of the peace panel of the MILF more recently. That's where I think more focus should be. It's not very much emphasized because, again, the Philippines is pretty much ranks better than most in terms of gender issues or women's issues. But those are the softer sides, those are the more invisible sides to women's participation that some contexts might need help in pushing for.
Good advice. Anmaho, I mean, you come at this working in a foundation in the peace-building operations, working a lot on these cultural issues, norms, local perspectives. What advice comes out of that?
Of course, I think what is necessary is the constant conversations and partnership with local stakeholders. But of course, if I think of the domestic politics in every part of the world becomes more and more difficult and more divided. So I think the role of international pressure becomes even more important everywhere. But I myself is also very much interested in how we can change slightly the adversarial nature of the language of gender equality to overcome the backlash from the conservative side. Yeah.
It's a very big problem that you just ended this conversation with that we do have to go forward to address. I want to turn very quickly, while we have our experts here on the stage, to student questions. This one is from Johanna Freeman. Is she here? She's in the master's program. There she is at the back, waving, in foreign service. And I'm going to ask her question and one other, and then whoever wants to answer can jump in. Joanna's question is, if the agreement had been written today instead of 25 years ago, what would have been different? What have we learned? And what has not worked well? What are the biggest challenges? We've done some of this, but maybe a little bit focused. And then another student question from Alyssa Macaluso, also in the master's program of foreign service. Is she here? Okay. What challenges do you see on the horizon, specifically on women's rights protection, as we're seeing increasing isolationism in the world from traditional leaders?
I will take the second.
Okay, so who wants to start?
Maybe on a personal note, with this related to the second question on issues that's, at the African Union. Right now, this year is my last. I'm stepping down as a special envoy after more than 10 years of special envoy. But my last battle is about a convention which is against violence against women and girls that must be adopted in this month, coming month, February, during the head of state. But there are pushback, and we need all of you to push back the pushback. So I'm just saying that even the student, wherever you are, in the social media, this convention that is out there, please help, because it will help us when it is domesticated to make sure that we combat violence against women, not just in conflict, but everywhere. So it's one of the... So if I had to look at the drafting. We were part of the drafting of 1325, some of us, but I would add the accountability mechanism, which is really the one that is missing. Maybe, we are finding ways and means, but I think that will be very key that we add on it. But I let my other colleague to respond to that.
Avila.
So, thank you.
Yes, just very briefly. I mean, I think the 4 pillars of 1325 still stand. I think there's two things. First of all, I think at that stage, the United Nations saw peace building as almost like post the agreement. So I think what we now need to do is look a bit more at, how those four pillars operate during the conflict as well as post agreement. And secondly, I think again the pillar that relates to sexual violence has been the most elaborated in terms of follow-up resolutions. I think less work has been done on other aspects of 1325, and I think that's because a lot of governments are inclined to say, oh well, sexual violence during war, that's them. But actually when you talk about, representation and other things, that's us.
Exactly. Anna?
I think what we have as a strategy in the Philippines, in the case of the Bangsamoro, is we made opposition or resistance to WPS issues embarrassing, something that you cannot get away with. And that resulted in, for example, a regional, a sub-national government having in its electoral code quota system, requirements before registration of parties for submission of a women's agenda, and other requirements that we do not find in the national government. That's why my emphasis is on nation building in post-conflict, because these gains we were able to accomplish because of the tradition of women's issues at the forefront, not at the peripheral, a central issue, and anyone opposing its discussion, something of a backward or a very old-fashioned position. And you wouldn't want that if you want to win elections, especially if you have a young electorate, as is the case in the Bangsamoro.
Interesting. And Maho?
If this resolution is adopted now, I think people will look at it with a sense of the urgency, maybe because of the timing. I mean, this time of the war. But so then maybe the reflection on the achievement of the 25 years, and also looking at this resolution with different light, is what is actually needed, is what I thought in response to her questions. Yeah.
Well, thank you all, and let's please thank this incredible panel. Each of them has done a great deal of work, and I think the sense of urgency and message to us and those who aren't in the room is we need to do a lot better and a lot faster. Thank you all. We want to conclude with a very special moment here. I'm going to ask Minister Kamikawa to come back up to the stage, please. This is a surprise, so I know you don't know anything about it, but please join me up here. And as she comes up, I want to start to say a little bit about her. Her Excellency Yoko Kamikawa has been a trailblazing politician in Japan. She was first elected to the House of Representatives more than 2 decades ago, served 7 terms, and has held several high-level ministerial positions, first female Minister of Foreign Affairs in 19 years, earlier as Minister of Justice, and before that as Minister of State for Gender Equality and Social Affairs. She has received a great deal of international recognition for her leadership on women, peace, and security, and has made history by paving the way for Japan to lead on this issue and stressing its strategic importance for security. She made it the centerpiece of her diplomatic mission. She has spoken about the important role that women play in peace building to her own government and to international audiences, from the United Nations to the G7, and in all of her bilateral meetings with her counterparts from around the world. She established the Women, Peace, and Security Task Force in the Foreign Ministry of Japan and held a series of dialogues under what she called WPS plus Innovation. And the 3rd edition of Japan's National Action Plan, adopted last year, links the Women, Peace, and Security agenda in many ways to disaster prevention and relief, what you've heard, areas in which Japan has demonstrated great expertise, as well as to climate change and reconstruction, among other issues. At her initiative, the Japan Diet organized the Women, Peace, and Security Parliamentary Network, their caucus, in 2022. It is the only WPS parliamentary caucus in the world except for the United States. A longtime champion for women in Japan, she has stressed the importance of women's perspectives in government policy making and improving society, while acknowledging the many challenges her own nation faces on this issue, particularly in political and economic areas. And she's been a role model for women in politics. As foreign minister, she's engaged in some of the most challenging issues, traveling to Ukraine in the midst of the war, offering her government's critical support, and later hosting a conference for the promotion of economic growth and post-conflict reconstruction, and underscored the role of women in the war effort and beyond. She has forged a new collaboration between Japan and the United States on women, peace, and security. The partnership between the two governments flourishes in international cooperation, defense, and parliamentary exchanges. And so she is clearly noted, rightly, as a global leader on women, peace, and security. And so today, on this occasion, the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security is proud to present its 2025 International Trailblazer Award to Her Excellency Yoko Kamikawa.
It's amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You want to say a few words?
Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm sorry to surprise you, but I think...
Yeah, very much surprised. Thank you very much indeed. It's a very honor to receive the very beautiful and trophy. Yeah, crystal. And it's very heavy. And our mission relating to WPS is very heavy matter. But if we shake hands and network each other, and then beyond the boundaries and beyond this sex and or other religion or something like that, so networking, we can carry the heavy burden and develop new world together. It's a solidarity. And I am one of you. Just we walk the same pace, not just need many steps forward, but together in the same pace. I think that's it. That kind of a step-by-step approach is very required in this very difficult situation. So I very much honored to receive. Thank you indeed. And surprise. Thank you. I will do my best from this moment. So next month, I'm waiting for you in Tokyo. Definitely, please come. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And so I say this especially to the students, but if there's anybody who doesn't believe one person can make a difference, one person can make a difference. In many ways, you don't have to be at the top, but she's really taken this issue and transformed it in her own situations, in her own government and globally. She talked about the heavy burden upon us, and that heavy burden is helped in being lifted by the great male champions. And I want to ask to close us today for Dr. Satohiro Akimoto to come up here to the podium to make some closing remarks. He is the president and chairman of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation and has really taken this issue and championed it. So Satohiro, please.
Thank you very much. I am highly cognizant of the fact that I am the obstacle between you and the wonderful conversation in the reception. So I'm going to be brief. First, Ambassador Verveer, Melanne, at the beginning of this conference, you said that the world is full of wars and conflict. And you pointed out the importance of timeliness and the importance of this event. And I feel like, yeah, this is 100% important, timely meeting that we have. It is a testimony to all the speakers, all the guests, and all the audience, as well as over 200 people signing in by online to this conference. So congratulations to everyone, and especially to Melanne. As Benita said, she is behind on everything. And usually, you know, this is, somebody says something like that, it's a level of civility, you know, just paying respect, taking chapeau off. But in Melanne's case, it's true. So if you could join me in giving a big hand to her. And secondly, Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA, I have to do a little bit of a commercial, so I'm going to be very brief. We are a 501c3 organization in Washington, D.C., focusing on the U.S.-Japan relationship. Our mission is to deepening understanding of and strengthening the relationship between the two countries. The main focus is diplomacy and national security, but I'm really happy and proud to say that we have made WPS, Women's Voices, as a big part of our activity. And of course, behind that, we have Melanne. She has agreed to be the first member of our advisory board. I met her some almost like 25 years ago, you know, and she's been a mentor to me, and a big part of the reason why I'm talking to you today is Melanne. So thank you very much, and we will continue to work on WPS with Shanti Shoji, our director of program, as a leader of the program. So that's number two. Number three, of course, Minister Kamikawa. And Japan is proud to have a woman leader like Minister Kamikawa. But to me, she used to be Yoko. She and I were dorm mates at Harvard, and we have a wonderful, wonderful conversation over lunch, dinners, various subject matter. But I forgot all of our conversation that we have, what we talked about. But she left lasting impression to me on the first day that we met. She wore shoeless. She was not wearing shoes and walking around the dorm with the socks. And she said, Akimoto-kun. And I said, who's this lady? And she's full of energy saying that, Akimoto-kun, this is a country of freedom, intellectual freedom. You can do anything. And I know that gave her impetus to run for the office. And she actually wrote a paper at Harvard that she's strategy of running for the office. And as a matter of fact, it took almost 8 years to become a national parliamentary member of Japan. So that's her strong will and perseverance to achieve her goal. And now she's a big leader of not only WPS women's issue, but Japanese politics. As you may know, she ran for the presidency of LDP last September. And under Japan's parliamentary system, that is this close to become a first woman prime minister. And she has achieved a lot already, but I expect more from you in the future. Lastly, one disappointment of this conference. Oh dear. Oh dear. I'm from Japan, and I don't do tango. But I know the phrase that it takes two to tango. And, when I take a look at the audience, and I'm sure that it's online, it's 94.5% women. And I am optically a wrong person to talk about women's voices. I'm from Japan, and the old man don't seems to be understanding of the issue. But it really takes both sides, men and women, to talk about this issue openly. And as a man, not only from Japan, but representing mankind, I would, as I say, mankind, I am determined to continue to work on this, not only from women-centered WPS, but also how man can be a constructive part of this international agenda. So with that, sorry, I forgot one more thing. Ambassador Gupta, thank you very much for your hard work. And although it was short, but you have made a lasting impression. And I'm sure that now you're going to continue to work on this agenda. And we're looking forward to working with you. So with that, I would cease to be an obstacle between you and reception. And please feel free to discuss whatever you learn and whatever you like to ask with the speakers who are going to be at the reception. We have to ask you to step backward a little bit so that we can clear the chairs and create the space. It's going to take only a couple of minutes, I was told, so if you could just step backward, I really appreciate it. Again, thank you very much for coming, and this was a wonderful, wonderful event. Thank you.
You know, Satohiro-san said something that I think took the theme of this from resolution to revolution. When he brings all the other half of the population into the Women, Peace, and Security agenda, we will have a very tangible, positive revolution. So he has a tall order on him. It does take a village to put on something like this. And before everybody moves around, please, I want to thank first of all, I get the spotlight here, but the GWIPS, the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security team is extraordinary, and they have really brought us to this place. And I want to thank especially for this program, Michelle Brady, Helen Rocker, and Rebecca Rattle for all the effort that went into this program, as well as Santi Soji, whom you heard Santahiro mention, and Abigail Williams, and others from the Sasakawa Peace Foundation team, and Marisake Takafushiki, Mr. Nomura, from the Japan Embassy team. It took a village, but we want to extend our gratitude to each and every person who was involved. Now enjoy the reception, enjoy each other's company, and know that our work continues. We have a long journey ahead to get to the revolution. Thank you all.